Okay, well, so this next question actually is a little bit tougher. I expect that several of you maybe found this fairly difficult. So I'm going to kind of approach it in a way that's pretty compatible with what we've been talking about in class. So we're supposed to write a function that takes some positive integer. In this example, it's 123, and it should return the sum of its digits. So if the number was 123, it should output a 6, which is a 1 plus a 2 plus a 3. Okay. So that means we have to have a way of getting those individual numbers um, from that. So we're going to put together several of the things that we've kind of looked at, several little helper functions. All right. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to write a couple of helper functions first. The first one we want to do is we want to have a function that turns a char representation of a number into the number itself. So we're going to call this guy, going to return an int. Let's call it char to int. It'll take a char as a parameter. We'll go ahead and prototype that. So for this one, if we like pass in the character 7, we want it to spit out the number 7. All right, so we can do this with strings like we've looked at in class. You can do ASCII math if you want to do it that way. I think strings are more straightforward. All right, so this will be kind of that pattern I showed you in class where we have like a string called map, fill it up with all of our numbers, 0 through 9. These are the things that would be legal things to return. Now, you could do some error checking here because technically our intention is we're only going to call this function with things that are numbers. So the expectation would be C would always be some value between 0 and 9. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to write a loop that goes through every character in this string map. And as soon as we find a match to the character we passed in, we're going to return the position we found it in. So parent I is equal to 0. I is less than map.length, I plus plus. We're going to ask the question if the character we passed in, C, is equivalent to map at bucket I, the character we're currently looking at in our map. Then we want to return I, the position we found that. Remember, return makes the function immediately end. Why are we returning a position? Well, the char 0 is located at position 0. The char 1 is at position 1. The char 6 is at position 6, so on and so forth. So if we can match up the character to the position, we get our conversion. All right, so now we know how to take an individual char and turn it into an int. Now we need to go ahead and take our integer and convert it to a string. All right, so this function that we're going to write here is going to take a positive integer. So what do we want to call this? Kind of like sum digits. So it's going to return an int. We're going to call it sum digits. It'll take an int n as a parameter. Right. So the very first thing we're going to say is we're going to say string number is equal to toString of n. So we'll take whatever integer was passed in and we're going to convert it to a string. I think it was toString like this. It might have been toString with a capital S, but we'll see here shortly. All right, so now we have it in string format. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to have to keep our running total. So we're going to have a sum, start that off at 0. Now we're going to create a for loop where int I is equal to 0. I is less than number.length. That is the string version of the integer that was passed in. I plus plus. Now what we want to do is for each character we're looking at, we want to get the integer equivalent. So if we're looking at the char 1, we want to get the number 1. If we're looking at the char 2, we want to get the number 2. And we want to add it to a running total. So we'll say sum is equal to sum plus char to int of number at position I. So char to int, number at position I, that will give us the number, the numeric equivalent of whatever char we're looking at. So in our example of 123, if 123 was stored in a string, first time through bucket 0 is a 1. Second time through bucket 1 is a 2. Bucket 2 is a 3 in that example. So for each of those individual characters, we're going to pass it to our helper function and get the numeric equivalent. And we'll take that numeric equivalent and add it to our ongoing sum. When all is said and done, we'll return that sum. All right. So the example from the question was some digits of the number 123. Got my semicolon there. The right answer, but what is it complained about here? 53. Oh, sorry. So I had mentioned this in class. If you were dealing with newer languages, it would have given us an error. In this case, it just gave us a warning. Our char to int function that returns an int, we've advertised it must return an integer, yet we are only returning an integer in the situation where we find a match. We know we will always find a match because we know we're only going to pass at numbers 0 through 9. But to make the language happy, we want to make sure we have a returned value that is legitimate. So I'll just do a little C out here just for an error message so we don't get, carried away, and at least you have some documentation for it. We're just going to say not an expected number. And then we'll go ahead and return a -1 for no good reason. We don't expect to ever get to that line. Newer languages have things called exception handling, but this will get the job done for us. So there is our 6, which is the sum of the digits in the number 123. I'm outputting that one directly. If instead I want to say int answer is equal to sum digits, and I want to pass it 3048, something like that. 8 plus 4 is 12. Plus 3 is 15. So this should give us a 15 if I print out answer. And there is our 15. Okay, so hopefully that one challenged you quite a bit because that was not necessarily a very easy question, made you put several pieces together. So um, that's a good one to start trending towards being able to problem solve it. You definitely had to think through that one.